Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's International Relations Council International Career Series on teaching English abroad in Spain. The International Career Series is designed to help you explore different international career paths, whether you're graduating and entering the job market, looking for a change, or just curious. You'll soon hear from an individual who can share their work in an international field, offering insight into their own background, their path, and what they're doing now, and recommendations for your own search. My name is Natalie Friend. I'm the Education Outreach Coordinator Vista with the IRC. For those unfamiliar, the IRC is a nonpartisan, apolitical organization that provides a platform for greater understanding of international topics and how they intersect with the Kansas City community. We will be recording today's event and broadcasting it live on Facebook. So if you'd like to review this conversation at a later date or share it with someone you think might enjoy it, feel free to visit our YouTube or our Facebook pages after this. Today, we are so pleased to be welcome Lauren Ryan. Lauren Ryan is a UMKC alumni who participated as an executive member of the school's International Business Club and graduated cum laude with a major in Spanish language and minors in French and business. Currently, she is working as an English conversation auxiliary in Spain. Her temporary position teaching English abroad provided the perfect opportunity to practice the language and continue molding and expanding her cultural perspective. Because of these interests in foreign culture and international business, she hopes to pursue a master's degree in international relations in Spain this coming fall. So it's safe to say that Lauren has fully engaged in international experience, and we thank you, Lauren, so much for giving us some of your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. To our audience, please feel free to pose your questions in the chat box below throughout our conversation, or if you feel comfortable, once we get to the Q&A period, if you'd like to unmute yourself and say hello and ask her that way, you're welcome to do so. If you would like to connect with the IRC, please feel free to log on to our website. That's irckc.org, which will also be available in the chat box. So thank you so much. And Lauren, I'll go ahead and pass it off to you and just cue me up when you want your slides.
Sure. Thanks for that introduction, Natalie. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background. Yeah, you can go ahead and put up those slides if you are able to.
Are you good, Lauren? Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. You can go ahead and click to that next one. Oh, did I animate them all like that? Oh my gosh. Yeah, so you already gave my background a little bit. I went to UMKC, go Roos, Roo up. Maybe we have some future Roos or some current Roos here. I really enjoyed my time there. I was a Spanish major, of course, and I love that little graphic because it is so perfectly representative. I think at some point I did have to read each and every one of those authors' typical classics. I also, like Natalie said, I studied business and French as minors. And I did that because UMKC doesn't currently have an international studies program, at least for undergraduate. And so I kind of had the intention of loading my plate for that same trajectory because I was really interested in UMKC and I didn't want to go super far from home. And I don't think you have to spend a ton of money to get to where you want in life. So I just kind of tried to load my plate for what I wanted to do. I put on there the IBC logo because that's where I actually found out about IRC for the first time. That's International Business Club. I would highly recommend joining that if you are going to UMKC or thinking about it. It's an awesome organization. And that's where I got to kind of meld together all my interests, the international world with the business world. And I've got a picture of Lyon in there because I studied in France for just a couple months. Natalie told me that she's going to be accepted to the TAPIF program, which is basically like what I'm doing here, and I'll talk to you about, of course, but in France. So that's super cool. If you want to go to that next slide. So these are just a couple things. I think it's important to speak to not only the job, but the experience of just moving to a different country in general, because I don't think it's hard to describe and think about all of the small areas that you're going to encounter these changes that are so different from your daily life in the United States. So I had never lived away from home, and then I moved to a separate country to live alone. So that was quite a big shock, just enough on its own. And I made a short list of a couple things that every day I think, wow, I would not be doing this in the US, like doing the dishes. I know some people in the US don't have dishwashers, but I've always had one. And now I'm every day washing dishes by hand and drying them by hand. Same with my clothes. I have a washer, but I think it's so, just as an American and being so blessed and spoiled as I am, I have never thought about hanging my clothes to dry and hanging my sheets to dry. And even though the winters here are super mild and nice, walking up a couple flights of stairs in the winter to hang dry your sheets it makes you realize you're kind of in a different world. Same as staying warm. I live in Andalusia in the south of Spain. And like I said, the climate is super agreeable. Thank God. I hate the cold. So I'm very pleased with how the winter went, except there's not like typically central heating and cooling. They're not very common. So I was every day in my house with like my hat and gloves and scarf and FaceTiming my family, and they're all laughing at me. I'm like, hey, I'm in Spain, okay? It's like 50 degrees outside, but it is also 50 degrees inside. And cooking, I cook with a butane stove. I don't know if anyone knows what that is. I had no clue. I have this big tank under my stove, and I have to like turn it on to turn on the gas. Just all these little details that you don't think about. And then you get to a different country and it's obviously a culture shock, but I love those small little things that make you appreciate what you do have, and then also make you slow down and live in the moment a little bit and live a different style of life. I don't miss those things here, but I definitely would if I was in the United States still. So it puts you in a different mentality. Your expectations are just different. And I think you have to come into the experience with that open-mindedness and knowing it. You can't come into it with the same expectations you have when you live in the US. So those are just a couple things to think about. Also, internet. It's so cheap here to get a SIM card, like a Spanish SIM card to put in your phone so I could have service like a normal person. I elected not to because I live in a small town. And so I just didn't find a phone store. So if I leave my house, I'm without internet, I'm off the grid. And I actually enjoy that. It forces me to be in adventure mode all the time, which we'll talk a little bit more about how I like the challenge and kind of the adventure of, once I leave, it's like I don't have Google Translate, I'm left to my own devices. So those are just some things to think about if this experience is interesting to you. I think it's important to first think about all of the changes that you need to be willing to accept, like the difference in the units, the metric system. I have my phone in military time. I have my weather app in degrees Celsius. And these are all changes that seem small, but when they all culminate, you're living a quite different life. And I think that it's important to open yourself up to these little differences that at first are so uncomfortable, and then later it's just normal. So you can go ahead and move to that next one. I'll get into the program a little bit. Thank you. So this is what I just stole the quote directly from the Spanish Embassy's website, and it talks a little bit about their government agency. So they have different educational programs, but the one I'm doing is called the North American Language and Cultural Auxiliaries Program. And so that's kind of like I mentioned before with the TAPIF. Basically, they open up the application to Canadian and American residents, like it says, native speakers of English or near native. And they invite us in to come and not only give that cultural perspective, of course, but to help with those small things you don't think about in language. Of course, I work with English teachers. They are Spanish, and so they know English very well and speak English. But sometimes there's those little doubts or differences in the way that we use language. And so that's kind of what I'm there for. I'm in English classes, helping them in all those kinds of ways. And just to, how do you say, like, give them, like it, pardon me, it says, bolster their language programs. That's the word I was looking for. Bolster the language program. Give them a little bit more of of a true English to help them. And it's interesting because here they normally teach British English. And so sometimes I go to the class and they say something and I'm like, I've never heard that in my life, or they have a different translation. So it's just another cool cultural look at what they're doing. You know, I've got my American jargon, American slang. And so I learn new things too. And so a little bit about the logistics. I only work 15 hours a week or so, which is, I think, a bargain and a half for what they pay me. They give, like I said, the stipend is dependent on your cost of living. So like I said, I'm in the South. My comunidad autónoma, which is sort of like a state. The area that I'm in is Andalusia, which is the south of Spain. My city is called Iznajar, and it's super cheap to live there. So they have a range of stipends, and it is dependent on the cost of living. So I receive the smallest, but it is definitely enough for you to live comfortably. I live alone. I pay rent. I can buy groceries. I'm currently out of town. They don't give me enough to support my shopping habit, but that is probably for the better, but it is definitely enough to live on. And for that, I'm super grateful because I didn't have to come here with tons of money saved up or anything. And they also give you health insurance, and the health insurance in Spain is already, they have a great system, as I'm sure some people are aware of or have heard of. And thankfully I haven't had to use it, except I had to get a couple COVID tests done, of course, upon arrival before incorporating into the schools. But if you do need it, they give you full insurance. I have my insurance card as if I was any other native born Spanish person. And then I talked a little bit about what the day-to-day is like on the next slide. So I am not exactly sure how the schedules of other auxiliaries look. I work 4 out of 5 days of the Monday through Friday, which is awesome. So I have a free day and I get to clean my house. I have realized how adult that is when I look forward to my free day to clean the house. And this schedule, it's normally not as confusing and weird, but obviously COVID has kind of touched and affected every aspect of our lives. So I've got a really mixed schedule, since one week I'm with one group and one week I'm with another group. But normally it's not too confusing, but I quite enjoy the variety and the change in schedule that I've had. So I work 4 to 5 days a week. I work 3 to 4 hours a day at most. Sometimes I have a gap in the middle that falls depending on what classes I have. So I might be at school but not working, and that gives me time to also prepare things for class. The teachers are super helpful too, in my experience. Sometimes they give me the freedom to prepare materials that I want. If there's a certain thing I want to talk about or grammar point, I'm a grammar nerd, so I enjoy teaching that. And I think being a native speaker, but having had a lot of language education, I understand kind of, I think, the way that students need to hear some grammar points that sometimes I lacked in school. And yeah, so I have a very light workload. I cannot complain at all. I have plenty of time, and Spain has so many vacation days. They call them puentes, so like long weekends. If there's a holiday that falls on a Tuesday, they give you the Monday and Tuesday off. And I had 2 of those. I had one last week and the week before that, in just this month alone. And also because of COVID, so I worked first at the elementary school, and then now I'm at the high school, which is atypical because I'm also the only auxiliary in my town, which is super uncommon as well, because normally they don't want you to be so isolated. But the other girl that was supposed to come from Britain was unable to because of COVID. So I'm kind of covering for her. And so they put me at the elementary school first and then at the high school. So that gave me a look at both of those worlds, which has been awesome because, you know, the little kids are so cute and appreciative, and you get to do stuff with them. And then at the high school, they have a little bit more capacity, more level, and they see the benefit of learning English. And so they have a lot of desire to learn. So that's kind of a little bit about the day-to-day. And then I mentioned that how seeing the education system, I think you forget when you're in it, especially, you know, public school, your first years of mandatory education and primary and secondary, how much of the perspective of culture and family and the institutional attitudes it gives you. So that's been really neat to see, because you get to meet kids from all different backgrounds. You get to meet the kids that live in the country and their family has olive trees, and you get to meet the kids that their parents, are lawyers or doctors and so on. And I also, every day, I learn so much. I'm teaching, but I think I'm learning more than the kids, not only because of words that come up that wouldn't normally be taught to me in school or in day-to-day conversation necessarily, but every day I'm learning so much. So that's a huge part of the experience for me, and why I wanted to come was for myself to learn. And then on the next slide, so I like to think about sort of the big idea, not only just the job and how it's gonna benefit, of course, your resume, having the different experience, being able to go abroad and communicate and get this job for myself. It's a really good, I guess, resume booster, but I think there's a lot bigger reasons that are just personally effective for you and that are going to change you and mold you and improve your capabilities for any job in the future. And so, first of all, it changes the way you view normal things. So when I talk to my family and I tell them what we're eating, for dinner, which is at 10 o'clock here, it is not at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, it's at 10 o'clock, and I am usually dying of hunger. And my family calls and of course laughs, and they're like, it's 10 o'clock, aren't you going to bed? I'm like, nope, I'm about to eat dinner, and I'm eating octopus and duck and potatoes, things that you can definitely find in the US, but are not nearly as common. And my dad says, don't they eat anything normal there? And I'm like, Dad, why do you think that the normal here is going to be the same as the normal there? And that's just one small example of how completely it opens up your perspective to what is normal, the day-to-day, the way you interact with people in the street. In my town, I say hi to every single person I pass, because if I don't, it's honestly kind of rude. One time I was walking down the street, minding my own business, didn't see this older lady on her balcony, and she yells hi to me, and I'm like, oh, hi. And then she sort of gently chided me for not saying hi to her. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you on your second story balcony. And so it's really fun getting that change of culture shock and the perspective that it gives you, and just everything that I put in that list, sort of the normal things that are, so normal, so common, totally changes. If I'm being honest, I never wanted to teach. I know that's typically what people think of. If you say, oh, I studied Spanish or I studied French, it's like, oh, you want to be a teacher or a translator. I never had that in mind, but upon having this experience, it's kind of hit me as like, oh, this is like when everyone says you should work in retail at least once to understand, the pains of it, the experience of the worker and how to respect people more. And that's kind of the attitude that I've come away with after teaching, because kids don't always want to learn. They don't always want to listen and participate. And so you get that view of, oh, wow, when I was a kid, I feel bad about, when I was talking over the teacher. And the biggest thing I think that I've come away with is how confident it has made me feel in my own language. Because when you're constantly talking in a different language every day, and then I go to talk to someone in English and I'm like, oh, I can say anything I want, and I know all the words. I mean, right now it is a little bit difficult because after speaking Spanish for so long, sometimes the words don't flow as easily in English, but it's given me this confidence where, if I had to talk to a boss beforehand and I was like, oh, I don't know how to phrase this, or I want it to come off the right way, I feel so much more confident in my own abilities to express myself and communicate with people when there's no language barrier. That it's something that you don't always think about, how practicing another language and being so uncomfortable all the time, when you get to finally speak in your own language again, you're like, oh, I can conquer anything. I can conquer any interaction. I can talk to anyone, and it's such a good feeling. So that's a huge benefit, in my opinion, is not just learning another language, but how much it makes you grow in your own language without even speaking it. And then of course it helps you understand people that are different from you. Like I said, people who don't want to listen to you or may not necessarily like you, those being the kids, but people different from you too, is just the whole society. There really is such a cultural difference that, you know, I wouldn't think that Spain is that different from the US, being a modern country, and being super modern in its politics too. It has a lot of similarities, but later those small differences make huge changes in the people and their mentality. And so being around people all the time that are different from you, it makes you open up and have that mindset of, okay, I'm here to understand, I'm here to grow and seek out those differences. And I think that's the important part. And it again makes you even more accepting of people that are different from you in your own culture. And I think that is an awesome benefit of doing this. And with that is seeking out the discomfort. It's not fun. I don't like not having the control, but it forces you to let go of that control. And even if you're not having a good day, if I get lost and I don't have Google Maps, I go to the store and I can't think of the word for the thing I want. You're constantly learning and growing, and it's not a choice, but it's quite an addicting feeling. At least for me, I think it's such a cool thing to be able to get out and grow so much in such a short time. And I think that's why it's so addicting, because within a few months, you've changed so much and learned so much, and it's exponential. Whereas I don't feel like you can have that same experience in a place that you're comfortable. And I think that speaks to all areas of life. You're not going to grow or change or learn unless you're putting yourself out there to be a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit, you know, in the unknown. So that's another huge part of the experience. And then being the language nerd that I am, I love etymology and language study, and seeing how words apply to the ideas, how we attach meaning to different sounds. It's really insane trying to detach your brain and words from meaning, the way that we perceive things. I had a note on that. Where was that? An example I wanted to give because I think it's so funny. So in Spanish, when we like something, we say "eso me gusta," and in English we say "I like something." So the direct object is completely reversed. So in Spanish, something is doing the pleasing to me. That the verb is dependent on the thing. Galletas me gustan. The cookies are doing the pleasing to me. Whereas in English, I'm doing the liking. The verb is conjugated based on me, and the indirect object is the cookies. And I know that's very grammatical. Maybe we don't all have that same understanding of the grammar, but I think that example expresses how different we use language, and how we view the world. It completely changes the way we use language, changes how we view the world, and vice versa. And that is the most interesting part to me. And then on the next slide, you can see, just to give everyone a little bit of FOMO, and being the Instagram generation that we are, that's where I live. So
we actually
on the left,
we had a question in the chat. Sorry, Lauren, we had a question in the chat actually about where you've traveled in Spain. So, you know, feel free to elaborate on that here or later. Someone would like to know exactly where you've been in Spain.
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, this is my town. I put only pictures of where I'm at because I've actually had the opportunity to go a lot of different places, which has been awesome. But this is Iznajar. So all of those pictures are in my town. That's part of I don't remember if that's part of the river on the left or part of the reservoir. So there's a reservoir where I live, which is basically like a lake. It's like a big lake. And you can see it in the middle picture with my town. It's so cute. It sits perfectly on a hilltop. Pardon me. and it looks like a calendar. And then that on the right is a walk. If you can, from that middle picture, you continue walking down the path, and eventually you just arrive at these beautiful fields of wild flowers and grass. And then on the next slide, that's at the top of my town. It's kind of one of those typical touristy looking towns where it's actually a law that you have to keep your house white. And every year the old people it's not plaster, I don't remember what the material is called, but they're basically like re-spackling their houses with white to keep them up and looking nice. And then there's these like patios that have all these flower pots, and it's absolutely beautiful because they're all blue and painted, and then they have flowers. And that middle picture is just down the street from my house. That's another look at the water that's right there. I throw my garbage away right there, honestly, and that makes me feel bad. I'm like, this is the most beautiful site, I think, in the world to throw away garbage. And then on the right, that's me. I'm in front of, we have a beach, or a beach. I know that there's lake beaches in the United States too, but from what the people say is this is the nicest pantano, like reservoir beach. It's super clean. They put sand there every year. So I've just been super lucky to be placed where I am. Not all the towns are that beautiful, but mine is. And I've actually quite enjoyed the isolation because it forces you to get out. And now I only have Spanish friends. I know that there's a lot of auxiliaries in Cordoba, capital. So my Spanglish is awful. So my province is Cordoba, and then there's like the big city of Cordoba, and I'm just in a town in the south. But there's tons of auxiliaries like me because there's so many schools and bilingual centers in Cordoba. And I was jealous of them at first. I'm in their group chat. They let me in on their like going out fun group chat, which I'm an hour away, so I never get to do anything. And at first I was like, dang, I'm so lonely. I don't have any friends, the first month or two, and they're all going out. And now I'm like, oh, I'm really grateful that I had to spend those couple months in isolation because I've bettered my Spanish so much. And now I have a ton of Spanish speaking friends. And you want that comfort of people that you can talk to, but in the end, I'm really grateful that I didn't really have that shoulder to lean on as much because it just forced me to grow, like we kind of said. And then so where I've been in Spain, I'm actually out of town right now. I'm not in Iznajar, I'm in Malaga, which is an hour south of me. It's at the beach, so I'm super excited. I've never been here before, except for when I arrived at the airport, which was at like 11 p.m. at night, and it was in the middle of quarantine. And the taxi driver picked me up and I was just lost, so I'm going to get to enjoy the beach this weekend. So I've been to Malaga, and I've been to Algeciras, which is also super neat because it's right there. If you know where the Strait of Gibraltar is, Gibraltar is English territory, but we went like 20 minutes to the east and you can see Africa from there. So it's right across the Mediterranean from Africa, which mind exploded. And then I've been to Jaén, which my friend is from there. So I've really gotten to travel so much for it being COVID times. I've just been so lucky, and I cannot be more blessed. And especially while all the world is now being able to travel, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. This has been really a dream come true, and I couldn't recommend it enough.
So, okay, great. So it looks like these are the end of your slides. Am I correct on that, Lauren?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
So if it's all right with you, I'm going to go ahead and close the slides so we can have more of a good conversation. And I have a couple questions to start us off, about your experience and everything. But I encourage the audience, if you have questions, or comments about Lauren's experience, feel free to ask in the chat or unmute yourself. But you talked a bit about, you've in your isolation and in your small town, you've really developed your language skills. So for someone who is thinking about this program, what was your language skill before you started? And, is it a necessity to be fluent in Spanish, or can you show up without any sort of understanding at all. Like, what was that experience, and you know, what can other people take away from that?
Yeah, so I majored in Spanish. So in theory, I graduated knowing a lot. And knowing is different than in practice, which is also what everyone says here with their English level. So you can know a lot, but without having the immersive practice, it's quite a bit different. And so I felt pretty confident in, you know, my reading and understanding abilities, but having those, you know, conversations in the street when a voice that you're unfamiliar with says something to you that you're not expecting, that's another level. So I had a good level when I came, but nothing like it is now. And to answer the what kind of level you need, the program requests that you have a basic Spanish level. I would say that it would be quite difficult to live here comfortably if you have only a basic level. If you feel very uncomfortable or unwilling to practice, I think it requires an intermediate level. You don't have to be fantastic by any means, but it's really, I think, more of a mentality and the willingness to learn and to make mistakes and to be uncomfortable, because some people really don't like that. So I think that's all it takes, but you have to know some, of course, and they require you to know some, but they didn't ask me if I was fluent or anything. And I think if you want to learn Spanish, then you're going to benefit from being here. Yeah. But you don't have to be fluent by any means.
That's awesome. We have a question in the chat from Ethan about the application process for the NALCAP. Could you expand upon it a little bit? Is it competitive? I know it can be very complex, but maybe start with, you know, when you should apply if you're planning to go, and, you know, what it looks like.
So the application, Dr. Villamondos, who, shout out to him. I don't know if he's on here listening. I want to thank him because he sent me the application. And if he hadn't, well, he sent all of his students the application. And if it wasn't for that, I literally would not be here. And he's also an awesome professor and just won an award. So go him. The application, I think he sent it to us in January. It opened a month or two after that. I'm not exactly sure how competitive it is, if I'm being honest. I don't think it was that difficult. The portal, I will complain about it not being the most user-friendly in like aesthetic terms, but the application wasn't super hard. Pretty typical stuff. You have to send in, you know, you have a passport, all those logistical things, and then also a little bit about your background. I said I studied Spanish, of course, which I'm sure helped. And I think the deadline was it was pretty late. The deadline wasn't super, there was a pretty large period. I think it was March or something like that. So I had plenty of time. I had no pressure to apply, and I didn't need any sort of special paperwork or anything before when I was applying. What you do need is for the visa application, which is a whole other animal. And of course, during COVID, I'm not looking forward to doing that again, but it is totally manageable. And that is my biggest tip. If you want to do something like this, is just start now doing your research, understanding the visa process, because it's not like the things for the visa are impossible, or it's really just understanding the process, knowing what you need, because there's no one that really explains it to you perfectly. And so when I filled out the survey for this program, they asked you like, oh, what can we improve? And I'm like, have someone, or on the website, please like have frequently asked questions about how to do the visa, because that was honestly the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And that maybe says something about the hard things that I've had to do, or lack thereof. But after you conquer the visa, I felt like I could conquer the world or anything, because I'm so not the best at red tape and wanting to, they call it papeleo, like bureaucracy, those kinds of things, all the paperwork you have to fill out. That was kind of the hardest part about it. The program application itself, totally typical.
Awesome. So a question about your experience. What was the accommodation like? Were you provided housing, or was it, you know, you need to arrive in Spain and figure out your own housing? What does accommodation look like in this program?
They I don't know about other auxiliaries. They give you the stipend and you can kind of do with it what you please. So housing is not provided. And I knew when I got accepted, they tell you what like what level of stipend you'll be getting, exactly how much money a month. And so knowing that, I just did a search of my town and found a place to live on my own. I didn't receive help finding housing, another thing that made me grow as an adult. So that wasn't super easy. It was another tip if you do this program. So I thought, because when I did the search, there was only like 2 apartments in my town that came up, literally 2 places. And so I, of course, picked the cheaper one. But when I got here, there's a ton of available places to live and ones that are even cheaper. And so I was like, oh, this is weird. But it's because things aren't, people here don't use the internet as much to sell things. So I think what I should have maybe done is come here, get an Airbnb or something, stay for a couple of days and look for a place to live. But it was also nice having already established, knowing where I'm going to live and knowing how much and where it's at. So it kind of depends, but I did not get any help. But it turned out, it worked out. So I think you can, if you're in a big city too, then looking online, you shouldn't have any problem. And that's another thing to speak to the language ability is to be here, you don't need, the best ability, but it did help me a lot in a lot of the visa obstacles because, the website, they put a lot of things in Spanish, talking to the apartment people, they speak Spanish. So I did think a couple of times to myself throughout the process. I mean, before getting here, I was like, I don't know how I would do this if I didn't know Spanish this well or didn't have someone to help me. So maybe that's something to take into consideration. But if you have somebody to help you that speaks Spanish, then you're fine as well.
That's great advice. We have a question from Nikita in the chat about the auxiliary program. Is it just 1 school year or is it renewable? And do you plan to stay longer?
It is not the full school year technically. It's almost the school year. So it's like 8 or 9 months. It's like a month after they start school and it ends a month before they end. It is renewable. I know I read on the site that they give preference to people that haven't done it. So I got preference not having done the program before, but in that group chat I was talking about the other auxiliaries, I know that some of them are on their 2nd year. So I did apply for the 2nd year because I want to stay so bad. I love it here. Even with all the things that I've mentioned about the difficulties, I don't know why I like it so much. It's way easier to live in the US, but I'm enjoying it here. So I applied again. They will tell us, I think in May is when they normally send out the, what do you call it? Not confirmation, the acceptance letters. And because I want to go to school here and do a master's. And so that's kind of like a way to earn some money if they accept me in school. Does that answer all the question?
Yeah, I think so. And then I guess, what do? You mentioned, like you showed us some photos and you mentioned your town is kind of secluded. What do you do in the time that you're not teaching or in class? Do you travel very often? Do you spend most of your time with locals? Do you spend most of the time alone? What does that look like for other assistants? It probably looks different, I imagine, but.
It might sound boring, but with all those like little things that take so much more time, like doing laundry, doing the dishes, I thought I was going to have just copious amounts of free time where I would be bored. But I actually, having sort of a house, I clean the house a lot. I read a lot. I love podcasts. So I go up on the terrace and listen to podcasts. I take walks, which is another cool part about Spanish culture. Whenever I ask the kids what they do for fun with their friends, they all say, oh, we take walks. So I walk a lot. I go to that beach. I don't travel too much during the week because I don't have a car and I like to be in my house, but you definitely could if you wanted, since I'm in the center of Andalusia basically. So I'm pretty much an hour from any spot, but I really just try and fill my time preparing for, the future or just enjoying myself. I'm not a homebody, but I'm okay not doing anything.
I want to take this moment real quick to offer anyone who might want to ask a question, by unmuting yourself, you're welcome to do so now. Otherwise, I have a couple more questions for Lauren, and continue asking questions in the chat as well if you prefer. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? Bo Harris, go ahead.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much again for doing this. This is like
no.
so informative. I'm really grateful for the information. I think someone.
Sorry, can I interrupt you? I want to see you. Can I see you? I can only see me. How do I see other people? Okay, well, participants? Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I sound like a grandma. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So someone asked earlier about like the competitiveness of the process. But I guess my question would be, you mentioned the application is due like earlier spring, March-ish potentially. In your experience, what was the gap between your application to your acceptance and then from your acceptance to departure? Like, what does that timeline look like?
That is a good question. And it is hard to speak to because my experience was during COVID. So normally, I think they don't take as long normally to give you acceptance. Everything was a little bit delayed this year. So they told me I applied in, what was it, middle of March, end of March. And they gave me acceptance like in July. And that was kind of cutting it close for me. I mean, I just assumed I was going. And then departure, I arrived a month and a half late because of one paper that normally takes a week. So from our government that I needed to give to the Spanish government for them to give me my visa. And it took a month and a half, which is normally not the case. So I think this year will be so much easier. And if it interests you, I wouldn't have those worries just because, as you know, everything was different during COVID. So I got here November 20th and I was supposed to be here by October 1st. So you don't normally have, such a tight window or so much time in another way. Like they told me late. And so I would have had very little time, but normally they would have told me earlier and I wouldn't have arrived so late. So it's really not bad. They give you enough advance time to find a place to live, to buy your plane ticket, and then it would have been great to be here in October. But I arrived late and that wasn't a problem, which I wasn't sure if, the program was going to tell me, hey, you can't show up late, but no one said that to me. I was in contact with the people, since I said I was in the elementary school and the high school, I had a contact in both. And they continued asking me, hey, is there any way I can help you? Is there anything we can do to, expedite the process? And I'm like, no, I'm so sorry. This is out of my hands. And, that's not a good feeling whenever you want to come. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just waiting on this paper from the government, but they were super helpful too. And so that was great. Once you get accepted, they give you contacts from the school and you can talk to them and they've been super helpful. So like I said, the hardest part is just understanding what you need for the visa. And if you want, I can give my contact at the end of this, or Natalie can. If anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to answer those because I wish that somebody would have been disposable to me to, resolve those doubts because it's so hard to find the answers on the internet with there being so many different types of visas and this job being so specific.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for clarifying that. We have a question from Ava in the chat. Does the program cost anything, or are the only costs from traveling and housing and other individual costs? Did you have to pay a fee to the government or anything like that?
I don't remember paying anything, nor even to apply. I don't think there's ever been a fee. They just pay me. What costs money is the visa. The application for the visa costs money. The flights, of course. What I will tell you is I applied for my visa by mail, and I'm not sure if you can, I don't think you can normally do that. So normally you have to go to your consulate. Missouri's consulate is in Chicago, which is obviously not super close. I was grateful because I was like, oh, I don't have to go to Chicago because COVID, they weren't giving appointments during that time. So I applied, was it online or by mail? So I thought that they would send me my visa by mail. Wrong. The guy calls me from the consulate, which was the phone call I had been waiting for. It's like, oh, we've got your visa approved so I could jet. I got the call the next day. I went and got a root canal, and I booked my plane ticket the next day, and I was gone. But what was I saying? Oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought completely. That yeah, so you have to go and pick up your visa. So I thought that I was going to go from Kansas City to Spain, and I was like, nope, got to make a quick pit stop in Chicago. So I booked a ticket to Chicago, and from Chicago to Spain. But keep that in mind whenever you're applying. If you can drive to Chicago or just have that already in your head. They said if you apply by mail, basically they have to see you in person one time. So if you apply in person and go to Chicago to turn in your documents, I think they can mail it to you. But since I applied by mail and they have to verify that, you know, it's me getting the visa, I'm that person, you know, prove who I am, I had to go to pick it up, and I wasn't expecting that. So that was also a good thing to know, or would have been good to know.
That's great advice. I think Nikita raised her hand. Nikita, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, so you mentioned you had Spanish friends now. How did you make those friends, or how did you meet people?
With a lot of the coworkers that I have, a lot of the teachers are actually young in the high school. And before I started at the high school, like I was in elementary school, the bilingual studies director helped me a lot, because a lot of the teachers want to learn English or have, you know, a certain level, and they want to improve. And so it's normal for the auxiliaries like me to give conversation classes. So that's another way I've earned a little bit of money, is people will pay you to practice English with them, different topics. And some of them here, they use a system of like A1, B, or A1, A2, B1, B2 of like a level. And a lot of people want to earn their certificate of, you know, B1, B2. And so part of the test that they have to do is practicing or like a speaking test. And so the bilingual studies director asked me if I wanted to give some conversation classes. And I was like, oh, absolutely, because I'm going to meet people. And that's actually how I met my friend that I'm with right now. She's awesome. And yeah, I think you'll make a lot of friends with the teachers, even if they're not your age. I love hanging out with all different types of people. Have I made any friends that aren't coworkers? I mean, I have mutual friends, or friends now of hers that were obviously at first mutual friends. Just putting yourself out there. I made friends with people in my town. I went out to eat and, you know, started talking to the lady that was serving me. And then I spent New Year's Eve with her family. So if you have a willingness to meet people and are, you know, willing to practice, then you won't have any shortage of friends.
That's a good question, Nikita, and thank you, Lauren, for elaborating. What would you recommend someone interested in this program do to make themselves a better candidate or more prepared? You've talked a bit about advice for once you've applied and once you're going, but you know, what advice would you give to somebody to make sure that they also have the same opportunity?
They ask you to write a letter of motivation, or like a letter of intent for your application. And so in that, I was honest with them. I was like, I love Spanish. I want to expand my own cultural perspective and improve my language abilities, because this is something that I'm super passionate about. And I'm sure that if this program interests you, then you have a similar mentality. And so I think just being honest in that letter of intent, if you haven't, you know, studied Spanish exactly, or have anything like that that says, oh, I study Spanish, I like Spanish, then I think they just want to see that you are competent and well spoken to a certain extent. I think you can do this program without a degree, but I mean, obviously, you know, having a degree, and I had an internship, nothing super out of the ordinary. I think I don't know what would make me, you know, a crazy standout candidate. I had a degree in Spanish, I think was probably my biggest advantage. And then, like I said, just being honest in your letter of intent, standing out a little bit in that way is all I can think of, because other than that, you know, you've just got, you know, your name and where you're from and all that.
I think, Bo, you raised your hand. Do you have a question?
I do. I have one quick question and then a little bit longer question. The first would be, did you, in your experience, need a TEFL certificate? teaching English as a foreign language certificate of
No.
any kind? No?
No.
Okay. And then second question, like I personally have a real passion for education and particularly international education. I'm really curious what your process was like, not only getting your acceptance and position in your institution, in your school, but then what it was like for you personally to receive that and then to go and integrate into that sort of teaching environment. Was that really challenging for you? Was there anything you wish you would have learned?
So I took the Spanish route of just language and literature. I didn't have the specific teaching Spanish. So teaching isn't my passion, but so I'm really grateful to have had that experience as somebody that, you know, I didn't think that teaching was something that was super interesting to me, but being here, I'm like, maybe this is. I've really enjoyed my job. And then, sorry, what was the second half of your question?
Oh, sure. So I guess I'm curious about you mentioned that you receive the school that you're at in your acceptance letter, or at least in that documentation.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your process was like arriving to the school, integrating into the school as a teacher. And I was hoping you could speak to your experience on that.
Yeah. So they did tell me, you know, what school I was at. I wish they said whenever I was filling out that survey, I mentioned that there should have been an orientation like this, like a Zoom, where they tell you kind of what it's going to be like. I didn't have that, so I was a little bit lost. It would have been nice to have something like that beforehand, knowing sort of more concretely what my role is going to look like, if they want me to prepare materials myself or if they'll have them and I just sort of, you know, employ myself to teach it. I think it depends a little bit on you or maybe on your school. If you are, like you said, you're super passionate about teaching, I think they seem super flexible to me. So if you, as much as you want to engage, it seems like they'll allow you to. So if you want to kind of take the reins and lead the class and be the teacher, then they'll hand it over happily in my experience. And if most of the teachers have said, if you don't feel good someday or you come to class and you don't feel like it, like, don't worry. So it's really, as much as you want to get out of it is what they'll allow you to. So if you're super passionate about teaching and want that international teaching experience, then it would be perfect. And I've kind of, grown even more passionate about it. Like I said, not having come with the anticipation of, oh, I want to be a teacher. And now I'm like, oh, I love this. Let's make lecture plans. And then integrating in the school, I arrived the first day, like I said, not exactly knowing, but I think I would recommend having some things prepared just to show for yourself, like, oh, I've prepared this, and if it doesn't get used, great. And if it does, great. But yeah, I think for someone that's passionate about education, tell them that, and they will be happy to let you have the experience that you're looking for.
We only have a couple more minutes left. Oh, perfect. I was going to say, for anyone who has any questions, now would be the time to ask them. Kelly, it looks like you have your hand raised, so go ahead and ask it. Yeah.
Thanks. Do you know how that would work if you were to already be living in Spain or going there? If you were to apply for the program, would they kind of accommodate that if they had availability in that area?
So the first time when I applied, they give you preference that's super general. So I picked Andalusia, and those are the options that they give you are the autonomous communities. I couldn't put like a city or a province or anything like that. And when you apply the second time, they give you the opportunity. I could have reapplied for my same center, or I could apply for a more specific location, which I did. I applied for a different city in Andalusia, or you can apply for a different one. So the first time around, if you were already in Spain and wanted to be close to where you're at, maybe you could they give different contacts on the website, for the different regions, and you could ask. There's nothing wrong with asking, of course. I'm not sure. It really just depends. I'm not sure how they place it and accommodate everyone. But if they're gonna give a second year to somebody, then they're gonna give you more, they're going to accommodate your preference. So I think it obviously just depends on what slots they have open too. If you're already in Spain though, I see that as an advantage. I don't see why they wouldn't, because obviously they would have preferred me to arrive on time instead of a month and a half late. So I think that would be great. And if you're going to ask to be close, then I'm sure that they would maybe try and accommodate that if they're going to give you the place.
So we have a question about if you can give more general information on dates, like when you would leave for Spain and when you'd come back. So maybe in like a non-COVID year, what can people expect? How long can they expect to be abroad in this program?
I think it's always, or generally, October 1st is when you usually start, and I end this year like you would normally end, which is May 31st. And they don't change that. That's not dependent on me. That is for all the auxiliaries. So typically October 1st to May 31st, and they end, I think, sometime in June. So you're here for about 8 months.
Well, we only have a couple more minutes. Lauren, do you have anything else you'd like to share about, your experience and how it has shaped maybe what obviously you said you're hoping to stay in Spain again, and doing your master's program, hopefully in Spain. But, what this experience has been like, yes, fingers crossed for you. But what this experience has been like in your life, professionally or personally, and, why you might recommend it to others.
I hate to give the cliche response of like, I can't put it into words. Basically, it's like you won't know until you get out there and do it. And I wish I could explain how rewarding it's been, but I couldn't recommend it enough. And the confidence that it's given me overall, like I mentioned, that's all I can really reiterate. And I guess also I could throw in the token of like, I found a Spanish boyfriend, so maybe if that's something that interests you, maybe you'll find love. But yeah, I had gone to France for a couple months and studied abroad, and that's kind of where it lit my passion to continue being abroad. And I was, of course I had nerves. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna live alone. I'm not gonna know literally anyone. We're in the middle of a pandemic. How am I going to meet anyone? And I think that just speaks to, you will get out of the experience what you put in and what you want. And because my director, who's awesome, the lady that I said kind of helped me arrange those conversation classes, she talked to me about how other auxiliaries have come and lived exactly where I live in the town and have not had nearly the same experience. She's like, I'm so surprised because you've already made so many friends, and I'm so glad to see that you're enjoying your time here, because other people have come and hated it. And I'm like, how could you hate it here? This has been named one of the most beautiful towns in Spain. In all of Spain, it has like a tourist reputation just for looking like a calendar. But yeah, it just depends on what you want. If you come into it, like I said, expecting a certain thing, then you're probably going to be disappointed. But when you come into it expecting to grow and learn and to be in a different space, then you're going to love it and be rewarded. And that's just kind of the mentality that you have to have. And I don't think you can really go wrong if you come to it with that approach.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren. I know you mentioned that you'd like me to send your email in the chat. If that's okay, I'll go ahead and do that.
Sure. Absolutely.
So anyone who might have more questions, Lauren's email is in the chat. If you are with the NALCAP program, so anyone interested in the NALCAP program, just search NALCAP Spain, and you'll be able to find more information. Thank you, Lauren. I know it's 1 o'clock now, at least Central Standard Time. I'm not sure what time it is in Spain.
It's 8 p.m.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday evening. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope that some of that was useful and practical, and also hopefully, maybe inspired you a little bit to get out of your comfort zone, because it's just been so rewarding. There's, no experience like that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for your wonderful questions and for being here as well, sharing your Friday with us. If you'd like to join the IRC for upcoming programs, next Monday we're having a lecture on South America's political patchwork, and Wednesday we'll be celebrating World Trade Day with a number of events with the Chamber of Commerce. So if you're interested in those or any other IRC activities, programs like this one, or even this program recording, check out our IRC website, irckc.org, where you will find links to all the information you need. Thank you again, Lauren, for joining us. I hope you have a lovely evening. And
Thank you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.